will stay on the turnkey thing, even analyzing turnkeys with the current um, rates, you can still find stuff that's going to cash flow.
Oh,
And
Hunter, and cash flow really well. And I was gonna bring up the interest rates too, is that people are often intimidated to want to buy right now with interest rates high. First of all, they're not high, they're completely normal. We're used to something really historically low over the last few years. But while we're in a buyer's market 100%, which means when you work with the turnkey providers and probably most sellers at this point, you can pretty much make them fix every single thing on that report because you have the upper hand. In a seller's market, you're going to be, I mean, they're going to fix the main things, but if you remember back in 2020, there were literally lines wrapped around the building at every turnkey provider's office of, they had a wait list of probably 70 people wanting properties. Everybody wanted a property right then. And yeah, they would fix any major items from the inspection report, but you did not have the leverage point to be able to nitpick and be like, well, if you'll straighten that outlet cover, or if you'll do this, if you didn't get the property, there were 73 people in line behind you to take it. So just remember, while people are holding off and hesitant because of the interest rates, if those interest rates drop, it's already established. Many of the real estate moguls and gurus and everybody have come out and said the minute the rates drop, there's going to be a buying frenzy because people are literally right now waiting on those to drop. At which point, if the buying frenzy kicks in, or when it kicks in, you're going to lose a lot of the leverage on things like inspection reports. And there's a lot of lenders right now offering free refinances. So one thing we had talked about the pro forma, like you said, there was I use 6.5% interest rate, and really the interest rates now are between 7 and 7.5. But the reality is that's temporary. And you also brought up rent increases over time. This kind of goes into a cash on cash discussion. But if you can get a loan now with one of the lenders offering the free refi, then when the rate drops, you can refinance that property into the lower rate. So now you're back into a better cash flow anyways, all the while leveraging the fact that it is a buyer's market and you kind of, hold why am I full of analogies? Cliches today or whatever, but like you're kind of the boss because the sellers really need to sell these properties, and you're not going to have that chance if it switches back to a seller's market. So another thing to keep in mind of the rates right now are completely normal, and in fact they're kind of low historically if you actually look at the 70-year 200-year chart. So take advantage of it is kind of my stance on it. But you mentioned cash on cash, and it reminded me of something. This is total sidebar. It reminded me of something I want to say earlier. Like for you, your cash on cash minimum is 10%. And I just want to clarify with people that that can be good, but there are some really amazing deals out there that don't hit 10% cash on cash right now, because you always have a trade-off too of cash flow and appreciation. For example, if I'm going to buy a total cash flow play, not a lot of appreciation potential, it's a pure cash flow play, I'd probably be looking for 10% too, also depending on the price. But there's a lot of properties that have so much appreciation potential behind them right now, and they're not at 10%. Like you're not going to get a 10% cash on cash on those at all. But quite frankly, what other potential they have makes 10% cash on cash laughable, because ultimately no real estate person has ever become super wealthy just based on cash flow. It's all of those profit centers compounding together. So there's that sliding scale. And the only reason I say that, since, well, we're not talking about cash on cash, I'm talking about I kind of put us into that, is you don't want to necessarily make that a hard criteria unless you're only shopping for a specific type of property. If you're only shopping for $80,000 C-class single family houses, sure, you might as well slap that on. But there's a whole different variety of other options where 10% cash on cash is not anywhere in the realm of possibility. In no way does that mean it's a bad investment. And in fact, it may be a better investment than the 10% cash on cash properties. But also too, going back to if you refi it into a lower interest rate, the rent increases over time, that will at some point get you over that 10% mark also. So it was in my head from earlier, and I think I said interest rates to myself, and that prompted me to remember and go backwards a little bit. So sorry for the kind of sidebar there.
No, it's all that really valuable information, and it just goes back to the fact that everybody's investing a little bit differently. We talk about, well, I joke about my age all the time. Yeah, old guy, right? And,
It's in the
you know,
name.
thinking, thinking that cash flow is what we need because we're closer to the retirement age, but somebody that, and I felt that looking at some of the Detroit inventory
I was
list.
just thinking about Detroit.
Yeah, because there seems to be a potential for appreciation there. Um, so in my case, I don't think, like, if I was in my 40s, that might make more sense to me than being in my 60s or at 60. Um, but that's the exciting part about it, right? There's something for everybody. And what you said before about, um, like, even today, although there aren't lines around the block, the properties don't sit for long. People are buying them up, and there's,
Pending.
yeah, depending on which markets. But I've noticed, even in, like, with the Illinois St. Louis site, right?
Yeah,
Those seem to go pretty quick. And
they
we've
do.
even joked because, one of our friend Fabian was looking at one, and he said, I looked too long, somebody snapped it up. And I'm like, I have it under contract. So we things like
You're
that
like, oh
happen.
yeah, that was me.
Sorry.
Sorry.
But yeah,
You owe
to
that guy
see
a beer.
they're not gonna last on the sites too long, no matter which market they're in. Um,
Not yeah, those properties. I mean, those are the 80,000s renting for 1,000 or 1,100. Those aren't going to sit long at all because it takes so little capital to get into them, and the cash flow is just absurd and insane compared to what's available in the rest of the nation.
yeah, yeah. Um, I think one of the things, so I mentioned that Chester and I spent some time looking at a few deals, a few listings off of the website, and Cleveland looks to be pretty interesting right now. And I think you were pretty happy with that provider, right?
Really, I admit that I went into it thinking like, I was kind of regretting getting involved with them. And I was like, this just doesn't seem great. Like something was weird with the communication. Like the whole thing felt kind of whatever. I was like, well, I guess I'll just go. I was blown away. I was like, oh, I had such a misinterpretation about it. And you had mentioned in-house. I'm not usually a fan of in-house property management with turnkeys, except for certain providers and certain situations. But if you're an in-house kind of person, they are fully in-house construction, property management. They even have an in-house home inspector who you'll still do your own inspection. So you have third party and they're not on the team seller. But
Mhm.
what they do is they send their in-house home inspector out first to try and alleviate all those things before you send your inspector out. So in theory, your inspection report should come back a lot less intimidating than the ones we were talking about earlier. Everything's in-house. And what I really like about what this provider is doing, so Detroit, I think hands down has the highest appreciation potential of any market like in the near term that I know of. And that's a different conversation. But when I was thinking of Cleveland, which is only like a 2.5 hour drive away from Detroit, it didn't feel as exciting. And I've been raving about Detroit. And so I went to Cleveland, and Cleveland has had a really steady appreciation. Like turnkeys were available in Cleveland years ago, and you could get an easy like 60 to $80,000 house. You absolutely cannot do that now. But even last year, Cleveland had about a 9% appreciation rate, which is amazing. But this provider in particular, I think is being so strategic because the thing with Cleveland, if you look at it on a map, the whole top half of it is a lake. So you literally can't build houses there. And then when you go south, there's what do you call it? Like nature, like there's only so many places that there can be housing in Cleveland. So there's a supply and demand problem. And what was really cool when I was touring it, I actually saw this with my own eyeballs, I swear, is you've got kind of the top by the lake and there's a lot of A neighborhoods. Well, because the development can't go up, it has to, well, it can't go north, it's got to come south. And so I was seeing a lot of these, like even neighborhoods now that are C neighborhoods, they're adjacent to the A class neighborhood. So for example, I know someone buying a duplex there. So I went to go see the duplex and we pulled up, and I'm not as much a C neighborhood. I'm more of the B plus, preferably B plus kind of girl. And so we pull in, and there's nothing wrong with C neighborhoods, but they don't get me all excited. So I was like, yeah, I mean, it's definitely a C and whatever. So we're checking out the house. And as I kept looking around, I was like, It was, swear to you, like 40% of the houses on that street, and they're huge. They're probably like 2,000 plus square feet. Like this was a top bottom duplex and like a big, you could easily convert it back to a single family house, that kind of style. And the whole street was full of them. They're huge and gorgeous. At least 40% of them were under renovation currently. And I was like, am I watching the gentrification happen? Like, I'm seeing it. You know, it's always kind of this like elusive, like, oh, it'll gentrify or oh, it's gentrified. I was watching it. And so he showed me there's an A neighborhood that comes right down to it. And this is the next street down. And seeing everything that was getting renovated, I called the investor and I was like, oh my God. I was like, get it now. The cash flow is awesome. And it's not going to be a C neighborhood for very long. Like I'm watching it convert right in front of my face, at which point the rent will keep increasing. At some point, if she wanted to convert it to a single family house to sell it, that'd be an amazing single family house. So it was just, that's what I like about this provider is there's all these nice neighborhoods that are literally being forced to trickle down, and he's right in the ripple effect of that. So I was like, oh my God, well, Detroit itself is a very big appreciating market in my opinion. Cleveland is, it does have steady appreciation, but because of where he's strategically picking these properties, they're in the wave of like essentially neighborhood gentrification, which then amplifies the appreciation too, all while there's great cash flow. Like they're not at the 1% rule, but they're teetering. I mean, they're better than like the southeastern markets. They're better price to rent ratio. So I left Cleveland all excited. I was like, oh man, I've only been telling people about Detroit lately, and now they're gonna think I'm a lunatic for being like, no, Cleveland's great. They were like, what about Detroit? Well, that's great too. I'm like, what? Oh, I'm jazzed on both of them. Like I love both of them, and the people working both of them have been awesome. Like phenomenal customer service. I think you had mentioned communication before. The communication with everyone's great. Again, the joys of a buyer's market, because the communication is not always that easy when they're super loaded with buyers. So I vote good in now personally.
Yeah, that's exciting. And I, you know, again, just tell people turnkeys might be a great option, and always point them to your website so they can scroll through, like you have the available properties in each market. And then if they get a spur, they can email you, and you've talked to a few that I've sent that way.
Yeah, that'd be, I so appreciate the referrals. And for
Yeah.
anyone who does go on the website, it's hipsterinvestments.com, and then there's a tab that says properties. But each market or wherever you see the properties, if it doesn't look like there's a lot available, still reach out, because we can't keep the website up to date that well, just because inventory comes and goes all the time. But basically what it can do is give you an idea. Some of them are actually available, but it gives you an idea of generally what kind of property type that provider, that market can offer. So if that in general is of interest, you can message me and say like, hey, I'm really jazzed about the Cleveland stuff. Like, what do you have or what's not on the website and stuff like that. So it's kind of what would you call it? Like a starting point to just get a feel for what's there in general numbers and all that. As far as the actual inventory list, it may or may not be completely accurate. So, don't hold to it too strong.
Yeah, it's nice to see the photos and everything. The site's really well done. In the past, I know you've had a couple of Facebook groups kind of specifically for Turnkey, but you've started a new one. And I think I heard you say when you did start that although you didn't want it just to be turnkey based, and just from speaking with you over the years and seeing how much other knowledge you have, just besides what you know about the turnkey space, like with lending, and you've hooked up with a great lender. You and I talked a little bit about insurance today, and we can get into that too if you want. But you were excited about starting something like Turnkey Tuesdays, a weekly chat. But you didn't just want it to be about turnkeys. You wanted people to know that they could come with any other questions. And like me, if there's any way we can help them, we're open to it. So I think that's exciting. If, like we were talking about the Zoom thing earlier, we get all that knowledge, then it'll be easier to do those things. One thing that I've had the challenge of over the weeks is our weeks learning with all the different groups we're involved in. Our weeks are pretty busy. We've got one one mentor on Tuesdays that goes from 4 to 7.
Ooh.
On Wednesdays, mine starts at 6. We usually go to 9 or 10. Um, on Fridays, another friend
I'm glad you
who's
said that before we get on there. I'll make sure to eat more food ahead of
yeah,
time. I'm like, oh, note to self, I'll pack my trail mix for that call.
and we always let everybody know, drop in for as long as you can or want to. There's no pressure to stay. Uh, we found this group of people and they're so enthusiastic. Sometimes we find ourselves 4 hours later, and I got to say, some of us have to go to work, and also some of the people are on the East Coast, so it's 12, 1 o'clock for
Oh,
them, and they're still there. They're all amazing, and it's been a great group.
well, and
Um,
you've been on some of my calls where it's the same thing. I'll list it for an hour, and 2 hours later, we're like, okay, we could keep talking, but yeah.
and two, like the last one I remember is I was going to say because sometimes we drift off and talk about other stuff besides real estate. But in the last one I was in with you, you guys all started showing your pets, your cats and your dogs, and which wine we're drinking tonight and things like that. So it's a lot of fun. It doesn't
Yeah.
always have to be 100% real estate. And last time we were talking about RV life, because Cynthia and I were kicking around the thought of buying an RV and traveling and things like that. And a few of the people are into it. So we got some good tips, but we try to keep it real estate based.
Yeah. Well, and like to kind of clarify what I end up like what my motive is so I definitely have I have the turnkey knowledge for sure. And what I really want to do is open up the conversations exactly like what you're talking about is even if you're not buying turnkeys, I love the brand new investors and Turnkey fits into that because turnkeys I think are so good for newbie investors. Even if you're going to start doing really complicated like flipping and all that, I think just one turnkey can teach you so much that can help you with the harder, more advanced strategies. So I think turnkeys are great for new people, but a lot of the people dealing with turnkeys are new investors or even advanced investors. Is that the conversations that I really love is not just teaching you how to buy a turnkey, but it's kind of some of the things we talked about today is there's a lot of mindset component. And so like brand new investors, for example, all show up on my doorstep and they're like, Mom, like they're overwhelmed. They're like, they Googled how to be a real estate investor. And it's like, you got to flip, you got to wholesale, you got to, and they're like, oh my God. And like, that's the kind of stuff I love is like, let's bring this down a little bit. Let's calm it down and let's hit on different things. Like, how can you get a successful start as an investor? Because as you probably know, a lot of people try and get into this industry and they get burned, they lose a lot of money. And where do you go? Where do you turn? There's not a syllabus for how to do it. There's not one go-to guru of how to do it. And so people just drop out of the industry. And I don't like seeing that happen because I think there's so many ways to get in the industry. But the conversation is oftentimes the same between those people and turnkey providers or not turnkey providers, turnkey buyers and even advanced investors who maybe have been doing things a certain way, but they're like, this isn't fitting what I'm trying to do. So like I've had a lot of coaching clients that flip properties, for example. I've never flipped a property, but the conversations that we're having, we're able to work through whatever the challenges are like, okay, hey, yeah, I've not flipped a property, but here's what I would do if I was in your shoes. Here's what I would want to know in order to make that happen. And so there's so many cool conversations to be had. That's what I really want to open my world up to is not just have turnkey conversations. Those are amazing also, but I really want to open up like a community, which you're doing literally perfectly with everything. You're actually doing so much better at it than I am. At least you figured out Zoom. I still haven't figured out Zoom calls. Is open up the conversations exactly what you're doing, and no matter what strategy you're doing, whatever's going on, just bring it to the table. And there's a lot of people in the room who can chime in, help, give you some ideas. Again, going back to that, like we are all investing for ourselves, but let's make it a team sport, so to speak, so we can all help each other. Because I know I did it by myself for a long time, and that wasn't super helpful. So yeah, I love everything you're doing, and just really opening those doors up to make it an industry that is a little less terrifying. Because I think when we all got in it, we're like, okay, well, we'll go to bigger pockets, which is totally overwhelming. Then this guy's saying this guy's saying this, don't do that. Make sure you don't work for them. Definitely work with them. And that's all it is. It's almost like too much information. So yeah, I love everything you're doing, and I have the same aspirations to like open up these casual conversations of like, sock it to me. What do you got? And you've called me on some of your turnkey things like, oh, what do I do? And that's what I'm here for. And I can do the same with you, and hopefully everybody else can do it too.
Yeah, that's again the group that we're starting. Uh, we all met on Zoom. You and I haven't met in person yet, but
Which is crazy, by the way.
there's a trust there, though, right? I mean,
Yeah.
you've gained our trust just because, like I said, you've had our backs through some pretty, I don't know, not shady things, but scary things for us because we were just
Some
starting
challenges that you've run
challenges.
into.
Yeah, big challenges.
Some
And
creative challenges in some cases.
yeah, and just like I called you the other day on that flood thing, um, I think a lot of times just to validate what I'm thinking, because I basically know it's right, but to get a second or third opinion, I think I reached out to you. Um, I reached out to Marcus because I thought he was investing in that market as well, but he's not. What you
Huh?
were saying earlier is about the, I mean, I appreciate your honesty. That's the whole thing. And the networking, like I mentioned, our friend Mike up in Gary, everybody sees how well he's doing. And he all of these guys that we're learning from give us the good and the bad. They
Yeah.
don't sugarcoat anything. And there's so many different, as you'll see this evening, there's so many different people in so many different markets. I've had people reach out to me because we have one in St. Louis and they have a friend that's thinking about investing in St. Louis. So we can tell them how we love our property manager and what contractors we've used there and different things like that. So the whole network is super powerful. And
Absolutely.
yeah, and it's just growing. And like I was saying before, Zuber had that 50,000 subscribers party in Vegas last February, and everybody pretty much that we are on Zoom with flew in. So we got to meet everybody in person, and
Oh, that's
it
cool.
was really, really awesome.
That's
And,
cool.
we've all stayed in touch. We haven't met anybody on this real estate investing journey that you would consider a bad person or a shady
Yeah.
person, and honestly, when I first started out, I wondered if people would be generous with their information. This is my contractor, this is my insurance guy,
hmm
or if they'd want to keep it to themselves. But that hasn't been the case at all.
Yeah.
Everybody's willing to share whatever's
Yeah.
helping them succeed or a lesson they learned and not to do again and things like that.
Yeah. I think investors in general, like the true ones, we we know what the other one's going through. Like we know how frustrating things are. We know how scary it can be. Like I think there's a lot of compassion there, even though we don't talk about feelings in real estate. I think I think there's a lot of compassion that we all have for each other. Because like even if we're not doing the same strategy, we've all been there. We've been in the scary part. We've been in the success. We've been in the whatever. And I think that does lead to what you're talking about is like I scratched your back, you scratch mine. Like when people aren't at it for profit in terms of trying to sell their business to other people, it's a completely different conversation because if you get some contractor's name from some guy, that guy doesn't make anything off of that. Like it's a legit referral kind of thing, and I
Mhm.
think I've never really met anyone who's not willing to share when they're in the weeds too. Like we all want to help. Like it doesn't benefit for you not to succeed, like or you succeeding doesn't take away from me succeeding. We're doing completely different things. So I do
Yeah,
think it's a really cool dynamic, and I love that you're pulling all of that out because what I would love to see in the real estate industry is just a revamp on how people help each other and they're not intimidating and it's not some dude behind a desk trying to sell you a $30,000 guru course. And like I would love to see this industry transform, and I think exactly what you're doing is a step. I mean, that's one of many steps in the right direction of exactly what I would envision for this to become.
yeah, that's super exciting. We
One of these days, you're going to join me on one of my in-person investor tours, and then you're going to get to meet all the people on my side too, which is also awesome.
yeah, I've gotten to virtually meet a couple of them on your Zooms and things. And
Yeah.
again, they just all seem like really cool people.
Yeah. It
Um,
was cool. The first Detroit investors tour we did, Marcus was there, Marco, like a lot of the guys you've seen on the uh Zooms and whatever. And I mean, we were at a pool hall line dancing. Like I don't want to speak for everyone. When I first started getting into real estate back in 2011, one of the first things I did was a big like investor tour weekend. And I was expecting people to be kind of stuffy and carrying a briefcase, you know, you think of really serious, kind of whatever. It was so fun. I was like, wait a minute. All these people are so cool. It's like they're a certain level of successful because they have money to be able to invest, but yet they're adventurous enough to be doing these kinds of things. And like, I've really not even run into pretentious people in this world. And granted, my company's name is Hipster Investments, and you're an old guy at REI. Like, we're probably not going to attract the most stuffy type A, you know, assholes. Sorry if I can't say assholes, but you know, like we attract a certain kind of person. But it has been, I think that's been one of the most exciting things is people are a blast. Like we've had so much fun. I've only done the trips in Detroit, which is why I referenced Detroit as the trip, but it's a freaking blast. Like it's so fun. Like we ended up in a casino at the last one, and one of the most unsuspecting ladies there was like, she knew how to work the whole casino. She's like, okay, we do this and we do this and if we do that. I was like, who are you? It's so fun. And just being able to put faces to names, like it's gonna be so cool to meet you in person when we finally do. And you know, Marcus was on one of the trips. I had talked to him for years. He was one of my biggest buyers. And then I finally met him in person. I was like, whoa. Like I know when I speak for myself that like it's almost like I don't realize people are real people. I don't know if I think I'm talking to bots or what, but like actually putting real humans to these faces that we've been in touch with for so long is a blast. I'll get to meet Chester next weekend in Detroit.
yeah, I'm so
Yeah, it's
excited
gonna be
he's making
fun.
the trip. Yeah, that's awesome
Yeah,
for him. He's been analyzing for a long time. Um, but yeah, meeting everybody again in Vegas, I understand what you're saying because we didn't even we only knew each other on Zoom, but it seemed
yeah,
like we knew each other forever. And we'd
totally.
go out to dinner, after the convention and stuff for a couple of nights. Few of us flew in. Well, we didn't fly. We went in early, met up with a couple guys that came in from Hawaii early. Just walked. One of them was elected our tour guide because he had been there before. We had never. So just things like that. And eh, everybody I don't know why, but they all expected me to be short, but I'm not.
How tall are you?
I'm 6'4", and people thought,
You're 6'4"? Stop. Are you
so
serious?
yeah, so just because of this, right? So they were all like, "Hey," and we had just started the channel like a week before, and I got these shirts, and people were walking into the event saying, "Hey, Frank, old guy, yeah." And it
But
was
they're like,
amazing.
Frank, whoa, is that you?
Yeah, so that part is certainly a blast, just meeting all the people. And
Hmm.
Cynthia and I got to take some time away. We don't get to vacations or anything very often, so we turned it into one, and it was really spectacular.
Oh, that's fun. I'm excited for you. Yeah, I did the same thing recently with Scott Saunders. You know, I've
Oh
done a
yeah,
lot of videos with him and
yeah,
been in touch with him for years. He's one of my go-tos for questions I need help with. And he's up to like 80 doors at this point, like a total role model to me. And so we've been in touch for years. And I finally just met him a couple months ago. And it was in that case, it was almost like I'd known him forever. Like it didn't even phase me. Like it was like no time had passed kind of thing. I'm like, oh yeah, of course we've hung out. Like, oh wait, have I never met you in person? Yeah, it's like that kindred spirit
no,
element is there.
yeah. And again, even meeting people in person, I was joking about, what if we meet them in person and they don't like me or something like that. But it was just an awesome experience.
I mean, you're not going to be different in person than you are. If anything, you're only going to get. I mean, this is you or anyone. People only get more fun in person. I feel like. I feel like it doesn't get worse after Zoom. It could only get better if it changes.
That's a good point. You had, we'll keep the recording going because you had a question about the insurance. And what I had found out because of analyzing all these deals, turnkey or otherwise, and they were always putting these lower amounts in their insurance estimate. And when I got into it with our St. Louis agent, she explained to me that she and several of her investors only do cash value because essentially, if you go full replacement and you're not gonna, well, let me go back. So cash value, if you buy something, say for 80, they will
Well, and
insure.
just I don't know if, and to clarify for anyone that's listening, what we're talking about is when you get an insurance policy for a rental property, you can either get a replacement value insurance policy, or it's called actual cash value, ACV, if you ever see the abbreviation, which means replacement value. If the house burns down, they will build you a new house and replace the house. Actual cash value means if it burns down, they just pay you out and it doesn't get rebuilt. So just for, anyone who might be like, what are
Yeah,
they talking
yeah,
about?
that's exactly it. So I think the benefit of doing the all cash value, again, if like we bought something for 70K, but we got a quote to insure it for 90, and our agents, the scenario she painted was, if it did burn down, you have enough money left over to clear the lot and sell the lot, right? So you're going to get, in that case, we would be insured for 90. But if you're going for a full replacement coverage, you're paying twice as much for the policy, and you're basically betting that the place is going to burn down. And
Yeah.
if it ever did, you'd be in pretty good shape that way. But for us, it was a difference of, on that property, it was a difference of $50 a month. So if you add the $50 to your cash flow, the cash on cash return goes way up. And again, that's what we're investing for, Cynthia and
Oh,
I.
I thought you said in your video that you picked replacement value.
No, I have replacement value now, but I'm going to be switching 3 of the properties to
Oh,
cash
you
flow.
are going to switch it out. Okay, that was my question, is why do replacement value instead of actual cash value?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, so
So
we're on the same train of thought there. I have to do replacement value because I'm absolutely diehard obsessed with USAA for insurance, and they only offer replacement value. So I pay an arm and a leg for insurance, but I won't budge from it. So, but if I had the choice, I would do actual cash value all day long, because I don't like, I'm not emotionally attached. I mean, I really like my properties, I will say that, but if it were to burn down, it's not like it's my primary residence. Like, I'm not that attached to it to want to, and like you said, it almost has to burn down at that point to take advantage of that. So yeah, I would do actual cash value all day long.
yeah, and the other thing, so we connected with an agent in the St. Louis market, and he had different options as far as raising the deductible. So it was about a $40 difference a month to go to a $5,000 deductible versus a 2,500. So I'm opting to go to the 5,000. He didn't really push that. He would have preferred that we went with 2,500, but I told him we're not going to use this insurance. If we use it, our rates are just going to skyrocket.
Yeah.
So,
But
so
even
it
if
was,
you have to use it on something that big, even if you have to drop $5,000 for it, like I have a rental property 5 doors down from where I live, and there was a leak in the refrigerator. The whole kitchen had to be completely gutted, like, water remediation or water, whatever, and then like fully down to the studs and rebuilt. I think grand total was like a $47,000 rehab, which I don't know if that's insurance numbers versus real numbers or whatever. But at that point, if you're getting a brand new kitchen, sure, pay five, who cares?
right.
Like, that's great.
Yeah, that's our thinking as well. Um, and a few of the people that we follow are in the same, believe the same thing, that they're never going to use their insurance for anything that small.
Yeah.
So why pay for it? Some of the guys have their deductibles. I know they have hundreds of units, but they're up to $20,000. But they've been at it for 20 years. They have a ton of reserves. They've got,
$20,000 deductibles?
yeah.
Wow.
Mhm.
I mean, if you have thousands of units, then
Yeah, and I mean their cash
what are
flow
they paying,
is,
like $7.30 a month for their insurance policies?
well,
That must be nice.
for 145 units, I don't know what that would add up to, but
I
and
want to look at those books.
yeah, he saved, by doing that, he saved over $100,000 a year. So
Wow,
that was good for him.
that's cool.
And that's the cool thing, like I said, there's some people that don't have a unit yet, and we know some people that have over 200, and we've gotten to meet them personally, and they're like you. I mean, they'll help anybody who asks.
Yeah.
So I think that's been the greatest thing so far.